The films generally were shot by my wife. Mrs. Chin had a penchant for photography. She just graduated into a movie camera. It was complete, done with a sort of passion, I would say. My kids were in India less than a year to the full 22 months or so. I think we were probably one of the few tourists to ask to be guided around villages, and we found them interesting. Natural curiosity would help explain a lot of the things that we did.
That year of 67, 68, Martin Luther King was killed. I remember marching about that down Telegraph Avenue. That was very upsetting. And then when Bobby Kennedy was killed, and it just sort of felt like the world's falling apart. And then the election was coming up and could kind of see the writing on the wall. So I thought, I'm glad to get out of the country, experience something very new and different.
I was the youngest, therefore the most naive. I really had no expectations. I remember friends talking about, oh, tell us what it's like to ride an elephant or go see tigers in the wild. And so that was my image of what I might encounter. But otherwise, it was a blank slate. I had really no concept of what India was going to be like. All my senses were alive, I remember. And our first home, if you will, in India was in a hotel on the beach. So where the UN helicopter was basically our front yard for the first, I think, 3 months or so. My memories are more the sensations of the heat, the humidity. My brother and I were always on the lookout for reptiles. They had poisonous snakes around, we had heard. The animals, the cows, the goats on the street, and the sounds of the trucks and their air horns blasting to let people know they were coming by. Cacophony, that's the best description.
Well, I remember landing in Delhi at the airport. That was our first place to land in India. Seeing women carrying loads of dirt on their head because they were having construction going on at the airport. And then the beggars, these children begging immediately when we arrived. But I wasn't repulsed by it. I think the nature of our family, being kind of open to new experiences, it was kind of all good, just interesting.
Kodaikanal was a predominantly missionary school for kids of missionaries, mostly American and Canadian and some European missionary kids, some of whom were second and third generation missionary kids. And then a few business kids like myself and my two sibs who went to the school, and a few kids from Thailand and other surrounding countries. Apparently they wanted their kids to get a Western education. This was one of the few back in the late 60s, early 70s. So we went to the school for 3 semesters. Really an amazing experience. First of all, most of the kids had been born or at least raised in India. Many of them spoke the local dialect, either of our area where the school was in the state of Tamil Nadu, so they spoke Tamil, and they were very much at home in India. Even though they were Westerners, mostly Caucasian, they were used to living in villages, and they weren't well-to-do. We'd eat in the local villages off banana leaves, some of us wore the local clothes, and it was kind of a cool thing to do as well. It was very intimate because each class was only 30-ish kids. The entire missionary school was probably a few hundred students from kindergarten up to senior high. And because you're living full-time with these kids, it's a family. So graduation, of course, was a big thing.
When we went to Kashmir, we stayed on this lake, very shallow lake.
And we were in the mountains, and it reminded me of the Sierras. And at that time, I realized, gosh, we may be in a different country, but the natural world can be similar, in different parts of the world. That was kind of a revelation to me.
These houseboats were customarily visited by merchants who had their wares in their boats.
Seeing those boats full of flowers, colorful flowers, drifting by.
We went on a hunting trip, a bear hunting trip, and we got to our hunting site by taxi cab.
And we went out with the guide with his turn-of-the-century double-barreled shotgun, I think. And it was like a 4-foot-long rifle. Well, and I was maybe not even 5 feet tall at the time, so it seemed huge. And we did see a bear, a little black dot. It was 3 hills over, and there's no way we could shoot it, especially with a shotgun.
They satisfied themselves with shooting pigeons. The downing of these flying beasts, the cooks preparing them, and we feasting on them.
It was all a great adventure to me because I was still a young kid.
Mostly it reminds me just how fortunate we were to be able to take that trip. It helped keep our family closer because we had this common experience which was so unique. It was kind of just us in this foreign country.
What I take away from looking back at these films, how important it is to experience people and cultures in other parts of the world, of this earth that we share. I would encourage not only my son, but future generations and everyone to get as many experiences like that as possible, because it just makes you so much richer as a human being.
I am really appreciative that my mother mostly and my parents thought to take a movie camera and to film so many things, and that we have these memories.
My wife was important not only as the person behind the camera, but she also did the planning and was able to visualize that these places to visit were attainable. We've been extremely privileged in being able to experience these things. I think the younger generation and generations will have a chance to enjoy them the same way that we did in person.